To say 2020 has been a strange year is probably a bit of an understatement, and holidays like Halloween is likely to be a little different than what we're used to. Maybe we're just pretending to be ghosts to where we can't see each other, but that's the great thing about video games. If you're looking to celebrate the spooktacular month of October, there are plenty of spooky games to get you into the haunted season. So today we're going to take a look at 12 different games to play for Halloween, or if you just want to play spooky games for fun. As always though, this is only my opinion and I would love to hear yours as well, so let me know in the comments below. With that said, let's get right into it. And to start things off, I have Little Nightmares, which very well may possibly give you nightmares. Now this game is very interesting in how it conveys horror. You don't usually see games do this in a 2D side-scroller, but the atmosphere is just so overbearing. The ominous art style, the bone-chilling sounds, and there are some truly horrifying creatures within this game. What makes this game so scary though is the sense of scale. You play as a tiny child surrounded by ginormous items and creatures, and every time you're around one of these creatures sneaking around, your heart rate rapidly increases in the fear of being found. It's one thing to see something scary that's your own size, but when they're far bigger, there's a helplessness and true terror added to that experience. Trick-or-treating and dressing up as ghoulish monstrosities are a big part of Halloween. Well, the entire premise around Costume Quest is around just these things. But in this story, going door to door to get candy turns out to be a little bit more spooky than originally planned as your sibling gets kidnapped. Now your main goal is to focus on rescuing your sibling from these creatures, and the catch is, whatever costume you're wearing turns into the real thing through turn-based battles. Really, the entire game is very charming and has that lovable Double Fine humor. Yes, the legendary Tim Schafer is behind Costume Quest, and this one is a joy all the way through. Now, if you're just looking for a game that's going to scare you, then Amnesia is a fan favorite for a very good reason. Amnesia: The Dark Descent is a truly terrifying experience that plays on some interesting game mechanics. As you explore a demented castle without any weapons to protect you, you have to escape both the monsters that of course want to kill you, or you can hide in the dark that basically makes your character go insane. It's this back and forth that creates a tension of how you want to approach each scenario. It's like a constant psychological terror with a stressful and depressing setting. With that said, there's a new Amnesia game out right this moment, Amnesia Rebirth, so you can actually check that game out as well. Watching horror movies is always a go-to during the spooktacular month of October, but what if you could play in your own horror movie, with all the cliches and tropes that you would expect from these type of movies? Well, Until Dawn is pretty much just that. It can be a little cheesy or even absurd at times, but you're in control of the decisions unlike in the movies. While in the movies you have to wonder why somebody makes such a stupid decision that leads to their death, instead in Until Dawn, you can be the one that makes that stupid decision that leads to somebody else's death. That's the thing though, Until Dawn does exactly what it sets out to do, and it's always entertaining. Games based off movies rarely turn out to be all that great, but Ghostbusters the video game is an exception. That's probably because it's basically a sequel to the Ghostbusters movies, so it never really feels forced. In fact, this is a great Ghostbusters experience, and if you're a fan of that franchise, this is a must-play game. Overall though, it's another fun story in the franchise, but also the gameplay is plenty of fun, and surprisingly, a solid third-person shooter. One thing is for sure, you'll have plenty of fun fighting off the several ghosts that you run across during Ghostbusters the video game. Medieval is an old PlayStation cult classic, but luckily, Sony decided to bring this wacky game back yet again. It tells a fun and charming story of a knight brought back to life to slay an evil sorcerer. The thing is, he might not have correctly been chosen as the right man to do the job. Well, things start to get very interesting from there on out as you slash your way through several spooky locales, and overall, it's a rather simple game. Outside of its updated visuals, it's largely still a 1990s game, but I don't necessarily view that as a bad thing. If you do like old school games like this, then Medieval will more than likely be something that you enjoy. Unfortunately, the camera isn't always the best, but with that said, I actually have two games for this spot. There's also Pumpkin Jack, which just released, and is heavily inspired by Medieval. So if you've already played Medieval, or if you just want a newer game, then Pumpkin Jack is something else for you to play. The Alien franchise hasn't always had the best luck when it comes to video games, but Alien Isolation is something special, especially the first half of the game. Of course, the Xenomorph alien is an absolute terror as it hunts you down in a cat-mouse-like game. You're going to want to slowly approach each area with caution and listen to your environments as you're being ferociously hunted down. Now, you do have a few tools at your disposal, such as a radar, that can help pinpoint where the Xenomorph is, but keep in mind that the beeping noise made from the radar can give away your location. Because of this, you will need to be smart in how you use this tool, but the thing I really like about this game is its atmosphere. It really does feel if you're playing in an actual Alien movie, with the same type of technology that was in the original. With that said, the gameplay does drastically change during the second half, though I still think it's really good. Now, if Ghostbusters wasn't the right game for you, and you want something a little bit more family-oriented, Luigi's Mansion 3 might be the perfect game for you. You explore a haunted hotel sucking up ghosts, solving puzzles, and defeating some very well-made bosses. Nintendo has always been well known for making high-quality games, and Luigi's Mansion 3 is no different, and their creativity once again is superb. Not only do you play as the scaredy cat brother Luigi, but you also play as Gooigi, which has entirely different abilities. He may not have a lot of life, but he can squeeze through bars, vents, or even spikes. This allows for some clever puzzles to solve and even a fun cooperative aspect to play with family or a friend. If anything, this is probably the best game on the list to play with the entire family. How we've went the entire generation without a new Dead Space is beyond me, but thankfully we have the wonderful technology that's backwards compatibility. And while this is still one of the best games within the genre ever made, you play as an engineer preparing to repair a ship, but along his journey, he must fight off the many space zombies that are looking to rip his face off. Yeah, it's a pretty intense game, but when you pair its brilliant game design along with an engrossing story, there is a lot to like with this game. It's a third-person shooter, and the way the shooting mechanics work is fascinating. You can rotate your ammo around to shoot off different limbs of the creature stalking you. However, because of the third-person camera angle and the close corridors you're exploring, there's always that sense that something is going to close in on you when you least expect it. Well, I'd like to tell you that you're wrong in that assumption, but I'm not going to make any promises. What I will say is that Dead Space is an excellent game, and hopefully it returns again one day. Alan Wake is probably one of the most criminally underrated Xbox 360 games ever made, and it still holds up incredibly well even today. The most gripping part of this game is in its story, as an author's book seems to be coming to life in a very atmospheric world. The story and the writing really grabs a hold of you from the very beginning, and that ending still has me even today. Seriously, Remedy Entertainment absolutely needs to make a sequel for this game, but it's also a very strong game in terms of its mechanics. In order to kill your enemies, you need to use a combination of light and guns. These things hunting you down are prone to light, so shining a flashlight on them can work like a charm. But there are also other situations where you may need even more light. This is where things like flares and light explosions come in handy. Really though, Alan Wake is a cult classic, but in my honest opinion, it deserves so much more than that, and it still haunts me to this day that we don't have a sequel just yet. When From Software released Demon's Souls back in 2009, little did they know that they were going to create an entire genre that is still beloved 11 years later. And Bloodborne takes that formula, wraps it into a gothic horror-like world with grotesque and horrifying monsters. Bloodborne is fast-paced but methodical thanks to its challenging but gratifying gameplay. Yeah, every single encounter in this game is meaningful and offers some sort of challenge. Then there's the boss encounters, and you really can't find many games that does it better. The world though is very spooky, but at the same time, you can clearly tell you're looking at an artistic masterpiece. Not many games can reach this status, but Bloodborne is an absolute masterpiece. It's not just one of the best spooky games that you can play, but it's actually one of the best games of the entire generation. And the number one spot goes to none other than the master of horror games, Resident Evil. Now, which Resident Evil should you play though? Well, that's a very good question because there are several great Resident Evil games. My personal favorite is the Resident Evil 2 remake, which mixes that classic formula with a modern remake. With that said, Resident Evil 7 is really good with a take on first person, then there's Resident Evil 3 that's a little bit more action oriented, and of course you can't forget the fan favorite Resident Evil 4. Really, you can even go all the way back to the original Resident Evil that has its own remake on modern platforms. They're all great in their own way that will not only terrify you, but they also have a fascinating world with engaging stories. There's a reason that I consider these games to be the best horror games ever made, and it's all the more reason I'm excited for Resident Evil 8, which will be releasing next year. Anyways though, that's it for this video, but if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.